we may now be live. There we go. Live on YouTube. Awesome. All right, so we are going to let folks into the Zoom and get started. Hi, folks. Welcome. Welcome to our panel discussion. We're going to get started in just a moment, just getting folks situated. And just a heads up, we are recording, so we're going to have just the panelists be on video. Attendees, we're going to have plenty of ways for you to chip in via chat, but we'll have the panelists stay on video just because we are recording and live streaming. Whoa, so many media, so exciting. All right, well, are we ready to dive in? Let's get started. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Tori Wobber. I'm a career and leadership coach, and I'll be your host for today's panel. Our panel discussion today is Pitfalls in Leaving Academia. And the hope for today's panel is that PhDs who have made the transition outside of academics are going to share their experiences, share some pitfalls they encountered, so that you listening in can make those transitions more seamlessly. My hope is that we leave today's discussion with a sense of opportunity and empowerment for what's possible in applying doctoral level training outside of academia. So to get us kicked off, we would love to know a little bit about attendees. So folks in attendance, can you drop into chat what year of your PhD you're in? Or if you're post-PhD, how many years post-PhD you are? So please drop that into chat just so we get a sense of who's here. Last year of PhD, 9 years post-PhD. Okay, 3 years postdoc. Did I see 24 years post-postdoc? That's awesome. Someone count that up. Nice. Okay, so panelists, you can see that you've got a variety here from folks who are right in the middle of their PhDs to folks who are in postdocs to folks who are after their PhDs. So when we're chatting today, bear in mind that folks have that range of just experiences in terms of where they are in their journeys. Okay, so today we're going to get started by me introducing our panel, and then I'll ask a few questions I have prepared. Attendees, please feel free to drop your questions into chat throughout, and I'll do my best to source those and ask them to the panel. Heads up, given the large number of attendees, we may not get to everyone's question, but I'll do my best to get to topics where we haven't covered them yet. We'll also post ways to connect post-panel at the end in case you want to follow up with folks. Final heads up before we dive in, panelists are speaking on behalf of themselves, not on behalf of their organizations. Whatever views they share are theirs. All right, so let me start off by introducing myself. As I said, my name is Tori Wobber. I received my PhD in human evolutionary biology from Harvard in 2012. I then spent 7 years working in the tech industry at Facebook and Google before starting my own business in 2020. I've now helped more than 70 PhDs move into industry roles, and I'm energized by empowering PhDs to see the doors that are open to them. I will drop a link in the chat in case you want to follow up with me later, or in case you want to learn more about my playbook. All right, so let's introduce our panelists. Kyle Ireton completed his PhD in neuroscience at the University of California, Davis. He's currently a senior statistical programmer at Syneos Health. Kyle, I'm going to ask you 3 quick questions so our attendees can get to know you. You ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. How many years post-PhD are you?
2 years, basically. So I finished in 2020, but like right at the end of the year, basically. Yeah, December. Nice.
Two and a little bit years.
Mm-hmm.
And work question, roughly how many emails are in your inbox right now?
Yeah, I don't feel like this says a lot about me, like in terms of personality, but in terms of inbox, I'm an inbox 0 person because it just drives me crazy if I have unread notifications. Yeah, but my office is, spoiler alert, not very tidy. Yes.
Inbox tidy, office less so. Got it.
Indeed.
And then critical question, Mac or PC?
Oh, I've always been on PC, and I feel like a lot of that was like, as an academic, I didn't feel like I could afford the Mac. So yeah, no bias there. Totally respect the ecosystem. That's just me.
There's a whole story there. Nice. All right. Well, welcome, Kyle. Excited to have you here. Tyler Hine completed her PhD in developmental psychology at the University of Michigan. She's currently an evaluation scientist at Trails. Tyler, 3 questions to get to know you. How many years post-PhD are you?
I am almost 4 years post-PhD.
Nice. And work question, how many meetings do you have scheduled this week?
Oh, this week?
Or today?
Today I only have 2, which is on the low end for me.
Nice.
I'm
That
thrilled.
sounds like sometimes you're more meaningful.
Yeah.
And are you a cat person or a dog person?
I'm going to say both. I have one of each.
The rare balanced cat and dog person. Nice. Man, see, these are entire topics for follow-up panels, but we're going to stay on topic today. Pitfalls in leaving academia. Well, welcome, Tyler. Eric J. Daza completed his DRPH in biostatistics at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He's currently lead health data scientist at Evidation. Eric, 3 questions to get to know you. How many years post-PhD are you?
I had to think about this, which says something. I am 7, a little over 7 years at this point.
Nice.
Yep, and it's a half answer because I'm actually in a second career, but I'll save that for later. But yeah, 7 years post PhD.
Okay, there's more there. Awesome. And I'm curious, roughly how many projects are you juggling at this moment?
I took a look at my Gantt chart. Yes, I have a Gantt chart to keep track. It's about, I think, like 6 or 7 total, but at any given point, maybe 3, 2 to 3. That's my sweet spot. I'm really focused on, and those are what are firing at that moment.
Nice. Oh man, Gantt charts, again, topic for a future panel. All right, and then for you, messy desk or clean desk?
Oh gosh, this is, I think, kind of like Tyler's answer with the cat dog thing. I will say a hybrid. I am a biostatistician by training, so perhaps a mixture distribution of messy and clean, with certain parts staying messy and certain parts staying clean.
That is the biostatistician answer. Awesome. Okay. Stellar. Well, welcome, Eric. And our last panelist here, Irene Chrysologo, completed her PhD in climatology at the University of Potsdam in Germany. She's currently a senior product analyst at Elsevier. Irene, a couple of questions so folks can get to know you. How many years post-PhD are you?
So I finished my PhD in 2019, which makes it 3 years and some change after PhD.
Nice. All right. We've got a good spread there in terms of years post-PhD. And Irene, how many folks are on your immediate working team?
So we're currently about 5. We're 5. So we're hiring, so we're increasing that. But yeah, we're 5 right now.
Nice. And preference here between sunny day or cloudy day?
Oh, this is just close to home because we haven't had sunny days in like 2 months. So sunny day all day.
Yeah, especially in the Netherlands in the winter, I imagine. There's imagination of sunny days. Awesome. All right. Wonderful to have you all here, panel. I'm really excited to dive into our topic. So let's go ahead and do that. And again, attendees, I'm going to start off with some questions, but feel free to chime in with questions as they occur to you. So panelists, I want to start with the journey out of academia, and maybe we'll start with the rationale, a little bit about the factors that fueled you leaving academia. And maybe if someone would share their experience there. And Kyle, I'm going to call on you to go first, just so we can dive right in, if that's okay.
Of course, yeah. And it sounds like I might have been the most recent case. So yeah, I transitioned out of academia about 6 months ago, and it's been like somewhat turbulent because I'm already in my second job since then. And the jobs have been fairly different, although both in line with certain aspects of my research experience, so that like either path would totally make sense if I told you about it out of context. I would say that like I was kind of curious about it. I was like on a knife's edge when I started my postdoc. I was like, I could, stick with academia, or I could totally see myself doing something different. I just had no idea what that would actually be. Like, I did not have a realistic idea of jobs that I thought would be compatible with my background. I did a neuroscience PhD, and primarily what I did was animal behavior. And then with some background in like molecular cellular biology techniques. I did have some programming experience, but I wasn't like a hardcore like data scientist by any means. Yeah, I don't want to be like overly negative, I guess. So like I feel like some hesitation, you know, in some ways things in my situation were good, but in other ways I just wasn't satisfied. I just felt like I wanted more overall, right? Like I was frustrated by the lack of movement on postdoc compensation. And I really felt like, you know, it wasn't just that like the compensation was lower than I thought it should be. I felt like there were a lot of senior academics on Twitter in particular that were not responsive to that concern in a way that made me feel like academia is going to be terribly slow to respond. And some people were like hostile about it. And that really, I feel like kind of pushed me over the edge. And, you know, to be fair, I have a lot of friends who are academics, including senior academics that are deeply supportive, but you know, that's not everybody. So is this like the kind of thing that we're looking for? This is really just my personal interpretation.
Oh, absolutely, right. And that sort of feeling of, hey, this pay might not be equitable, and there are folks who are actively coming out to support that inequity. That's a really tough environment to be in. Mm-hmm. Other panelists, anyone have a similar experience or a similar vibe in terms of their thoughts in making the move?
Yeah, I know for me, I actually ended up, after my dear PhD, doing a postdoc. So I did a postdoc for 3 years. And in the last year of my postdoc, I basically spent that year looking for jobs. So that included faculty applications, certainly, but also industry jobs. So the little spoiler I gave you all about my previous career is that I had worked for 5 years as a master's level biostatistician in pharma. And I decided to go back. So I had industry experience already. I took 8 years to do my dear PH, and then 3 years of a postdoc. So I was open to looking at industry, but kind of in the same vibes as what Kyle said. During the faculty search, I found 0 positions that were interested in what I was pitching. That's a whole nother conversation, because I realized in retrospect I was pitching it in a narrow way that wasn't really attractive to funders, which is something I learned in industry. But that was sort of the negative vibe I got. Like, all right, well, nothing's really working here. I'm glad I'm also looking in industry at the same time. So that's my connection.
Yeah, though, Eric, that must have been tiring, doing a faculty job search as well as an industry job search at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the big silver lining is that I now have a blog, Stats of One, which was generated from my research statement. So for those who are still early in their PhDs or DRPHs or doctorates, you have to write a faculty or a research statement, a teaching statement, and I don't know if it's required now. Hopefully it is a diversity statement when applying for faculty positions. And I spent a lot of time doing that. So I decided, how can I kind of pivot this into something moving forward? And now I have a blog.
Whoa, I would have never thought, like my research and teaching statements are growing dust somewhere on a hard drive. So to put them out in a blog, that's stellar. Awesome. Anything else folks want to say about that decision to leave academics? Anything there that might resonate with attendees in terms of folks having a similar experience?
Sure. I can say that my decision to shift out of academia was sort of I don't call it a perfect storm, because storm sounds negative, but like it was a mixing of a lot of different factors. So my dissertation work was focused on understanding how experiences like child maltreatment are associated with later anxiety and depression. And I was working directly with children and families who had experienced maltreatment. And I just felt like an urgency to do work that was very quickly turned around for the benefit of those families. And got sort of disillusioned with like, it's going to take my lab 6 years to publish this data. And then how many years is it going to take for someone else to pick it up and run with it for a policy person? Will it even replicate? Like I had all of these kind of like existential crises around seeing very like immediate needs in front of me, and then thinking about what I was doing was contributing to like helping someone, in front of me. So that was one piece. Another piece, to be really real, I found teaching like totally emotionally exhausting, and didn't want to do that. And then thinking about academic careers that were lighter on teaching, I think, as others have alluded to, with the academic job market, I saw like the people who really succeeded on the job market valued different aspects of the job than I did. I really am sort of like a methods person. And I saw people around me who were more methodsy and struggled to get those faculty jobs, whereas someone who wasn't as strong in analysis probably can't do it on their own, but like cranks out papers was getting really great faculty jobs. And so I just sort of stepped back and looked at the whole picture and was like, this isn't really a good fit for me long term.
In my case, it was a little bit of what everybody said, but what really kind of pushed me over the edge, so to say, is I got tired of the uncertainty. As you know, I did the postdocs, and which were like 1 year contracts, 1 year, and then after a year we'll decide again, and then after a year we'll decide again. And as someone who was first on a visa and also had to move for it, there was just so much weight of the uncertainty. Where can I renew my apartment because I don't know if I will have a job in 2 months? Can I renew, can I invest in this nice thing for my apartment because will I have to sell it again after some time? And so big things and little things, they kind of weighed on me, and I was like, I'm and that's enough of the uncertainty. I want a little bit more stability. And so I decided, okay, maybe, industry is an option.
Well, and let's zoom in on that topic of stability, because I think that's one that folks like to speak of as an advantage in academics, but realistically, there are different forms of stability. So I'm curious, Irene, now that you're on the other side, how do things feel in terms of the stability relative to those 1 year postdocs?
So I'm still new to this job. I'm like 9 months in, and here in the Netherlands, there's also like a probationary phase, which is 1 year. And then after that, it can be permanent. So I'm still in that like 1 year phase, but I learned that I will get extended. So I'm happy about that. But even then, it still felt a little bit less wobbly, in the sense that to get that extension, or the way that they evaluate my performance after a year, is not based on like an output that is hard to achieve, like a publication, which is a very what's that? It depends on so many other factors other than yourself. So having that as a baseline for extending a job contract is tough. So not having that, I think it gives me a feeling of stability.
Yeah, well, and communicated performance expectations, things like that, not always uniform in academics. Anyone else want to speak to the stability point? Now that you're seeing paths outside of the academy, how does the level of stability feel?
Well, I'll give you all a very real experience. So after my postdoc, I was in a health data science role for about 2 years, and then I was laid off. And unfortunately, it also coincided with the start of the pandemic. So I think one thing is to realize that that also happens in industry. Layoffs do happen. They're in general, ideally, hopefully not personal. In our case, it was a company decision. They were going a different direction. So there's a faster timeline in general. Speaking to Irene's point, also, you have faster timelines for finding new jobs. You leaving your job and then finding your job is a faster timeline. Evaluating your performance is a faster timeline. There are issues in industry, just like in academia, with how good those evaluations are. But The faster timeline in general is an aspect that's present in industry that I didn't find in academia. So there is that, and that's kind of what popped out at me.
Yeah, +1 to things moving faster outside of a university. And so there's a question here from the chat from Josephine that I want to bring in because this speaks to potential pitfalls. Anything that bothered you in academia that you expected to be different in industry, but that turned out to be the same?
Yeah, so what I was speaking about earlier about timeline, my first job outside of my PhD was working for the federal government, and some things really turned around quickly and immediately were implemented, and that was really exciting. But other things, like the entire 3 years that I worked there had been zero movement on certain projects. And so it didn't actually feel like there were aspects of the work that didn't feel like they were moving faster. It was more of a mix than I felt in grad school, but I got frustrated with that and left about a year ago.
And Tyler, it sounds like that opportunity for impact, that pace towards impact really matters for you. Are you finding more opportunity there in your current role?
Yes. So I am now at a nonprofit that is like accelerating at an unbelievably fast pace, which is really exciting for me. And we're really working towards continuous feedback, continuous conversation between our evaluation team and our clinical programming team. And so that's really exciting for me.
Well, and exciting because I want to call out that it's sort of, okay, I want that impact, not getting it here. I want that impact, not getting it here. But actually, with a couple of iterations there, you've now found a place where there's a click there. There's an opportunity to do work that you feel is meaningful at a pace that works.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to provide the caveat. I think someone could look at that example and think that's a government versus nonprofit issue. And I think that's maybe partially true, but I also think the culture of, you're part of the government or your organization is really critical. So just want to throw that out there for anyone who is really interested in that fast-paced information turnaround.
Nice. Another question here in the chat from Priya. Academia tells us that jobs outside of academia are not fulfilling, that they're corporate, that they're not real science. Do folks have thoughts on that topic?
I'll throw in on that because I feel like that is very unfair based on my now lived experience. I understand the perspective because I was deeply in academia for a long time and I didn't have any personal connections to the outside world. When I was considering transitioning from my postdoc into my first job, which was at a biotech startup, I was worried that people would be different there in some way that I would find it hard to relate to them and connect to them. And nothing could be further from the truth. I found really awesome friendships there, really strong connections. I found the work to be very meaningful. In this company, we were developing novel medical devices. And I think similar to what Tyler was saying about finding a way to make immediate impact on people's lives, I was very excited to help them accelerate those products to clinical trials so that they would actually, affect patients and make their lives better. So, there's a very wide range of companies out there, a very wide range of jobs that you can do. And there are a lot of paths that are very rich with meaning. And I got to tell you, frankly, most people in the world are on this side of the fence relative to academia. There are a lot of real people out here, a lot of good people, right? And life is life. It's not perfect anywhere, but there's a lot of good out here in my experience and in my opinion.
Well, and so quick show of hands panel, how many of you have worked on something interesting in your post-academia work, right? So show of hands if you've done something intellectually interesting. Nice. And then what about that impact, right? How many of you feel like that work is having some meaningful impact? Nice. All right, Irene's getting there. It hasn't happened yet, but right. So just to really put that out there for attendees, there is opportunity for interesting, meaningful, impactful work in all sorts of different areas. So academia doesn't have a monopoly there. All right, I want to bring in a question from Michelle because this speaks to this pitfalls topic. Can anyone explain what were the hardest aspects to adjust to going from academia to industry? Anyone have any experiences to share there?
Sure. So one of the challenges that I experienced as I was transitioning is sort of interpreting job postings. And this is a pitfall I'm seeing a lot now as a hiring manager. So as somebody who had been so steeped in academia, I didn't really understand the nuance between like an analyst versus a researcher necessarily across organizations, and that those are actually, you know, quite different roles, even though they can both involve research, both involve data analysis, and like the career trajectory is different in all of that. And so I think leveraging, like if you can connect with someone through your alumni network for 15 minutes who's in that industry to help you kind of, and even across industries, right? Like analyst government sector, analyst nonprofit sector are not necessarily the exact same type of job. And so if you can connect with someone to sort of decode that so that you have a really good understanding of what, you know, you're applying to. And then I think the other thing is being really clear yourself on what it is you're looking for. So I've had people apply to work in a very like execution focused job that's, you know, like if you want to execute on data analysis from 9 to 5 and be done for the day, like that is awesome. And this was a great job. But there were people coming in who wanted to like have, you know, vision, like build, do create, and it just wasn't, there was a mismatch between their goals and what they're applying for. So I think really understanding what you want and understanding the code behind the job posting.
Anyone else run into that experience? Oh, go ahead, Irene.
Yeah, so I 100% agree with that. When I was also searching for a job, I had no idea what a data analyst is, and that's what I do now. And so when I was looking for jobs, at first I was like, oh, data analyst, I don't know that, like research or any like other descriptions. If I'm not familiar with it, I ignore it because I was only looking for scientist positions. And then as I increased my search more and more and widened my got to talk to other people, I realized, oh, there are other keywords that I can use in searching. There are other job titles that apply to me. And so, yeah, I guess just not being limited to specific keywords or specific kinds of jobs to search for. And in relation to that, it was on my notes about this, is to not self-reject when looking at job applications. Don't say, oh, I don't fit this job just because you don't fit the description that they're looking for, but it could be that it's just worded differently and that your skills can be transferred to fit that job. And in the end, it could be exactly who they're looking for.
And so I want to dive in on that point because I think this speaks to Karina's question in the chat about this skill mapping. So understanding what skills you bring as a PhD, figuring out how to translate that from these job listings. How did folks start to do that in their own search? Did you make mistakes doing it? Any experiences there to share?
So yeah, I mean, I'm happy to share. So things kind of like started taking off on the job search for me when I fully filled in my LinkedIn, including all the skills that I used. And basically what I did is I took all the information out of my industry resume and I put all of that into my LinkedIn. My understanding now is that recruiters like literally do a search based on filtering for keywords, and they simply look for an exact match. So when it comes to like parsing job descriptions, what I've found to be most useful is like, look at the keywords that they list that they're looking for. You don't need to match 100%. It's incredibly rare that they would find that, And frankly, they don't have the luxury of finding the ideal candidate in every case. They need people. I would shoot for like, I don't know, like 2/3, I feel like would make me feel reasonable confidence that I'm a decent match. And I think a lot of the experience that you develop is like, which of those keywords are actually essentials, whereas like, what are luxuries, you know? Like if you're doing data science, you need to know like either Python or R, basically. But then they're going to add a suite of skills and techniques, which are like, you know, nice to haves. Yeah.
And I'm curious, you know, Kyle, I agree with you. I think that there sort of are the essential and then the nice to haves. Did you get that experience through just sort of reading a lot of job listings? Was it through talking to folks in role? How did you suss out which of those were must haves versus nice to haves?
Yeah. So at this point, I just want to encourage everybody, like, so one of the pitfalls that I had, I feel like, was waiting so long to start the job search. A lot of what I learned was simply by taking those steps and getting real world experience with the application process. I read a lot of job descriptions on LinkedIn. I also got, you know, a steady stream, not a huge volume of recruiter DMs, but enough that I had regular screening calls with them. And that really helped me understand, like they guided me. They were like, okay, can we say that you have this aspect of experience? And it's not that they were looking for me to like say that I could do things that I couldn't do, but it was about interpreting my actual experience in terms that they could send to the people that were trying to hire me. So like they worked with me basically, and I got a better sense based on those interactions.
And so almost the way I like to frame that is it's not building new skills, it's learning new words for your existing skills or a new framing for your existing skills. And so I'm curious. Oh, go ahead, Irene, go.
I want to add something to that as well. So when I learned a little bit more about like how to search for jobs, I realized that I could also kind of leverage on not the main, let's say the main scientific skills or the main like PhD research skills that I had. For example, in my case, I could, instead of just searching atmospheric science jobs, I was also very into science communication. And so I thought, oh, I could also maybe search for jobs in that area. And then there's also a whole lot of, let's say, keywords or a whole lot of job types and titles that are associated with that. That's not necessarily under science communication. So I was into, or I am still into illustration. And so I looked for like graphic designer jobs that are being applied to science, because there are more and more like science communication jobs that are looking for like artists and illustrators. And actually there was one job that I applied for in University of Michigan where they were hiring a graphic designer to make figures and presentations and diagrams for publications, for grant applications, for all their science, let's say, media. And that was that was one thing I considered for transitioning out. So it's not also necessarily, don't necessarily limit like only this scientific kind of job.
The other thing I hear there, Irene, that I really want to encapsulate for folks, many of the things you're mentioning are skills, communication, design. Kyle talked about, data, right? Maybe that's tools in the data space, but those are skills rather than topics. So when you're in academics, you tend to sell your topic because everyone has the same skills.
Right.
But in jobs, it's about reframing to think about your skills, because often these jobs are looking for skills. Does that land with other folks on the panel?
Yeah, and I would also add, demonstrated ability to gain new skills quickly as PhD students. Like you learn new methods all the time. And so if 4 out of 5 techniques they're looking for, and you can say, I have this demonstrated track record of learning these new techniques quickly, I think that's helpful framing.
I would love to just, oh, sorry, Eric, were you gonna? Okay. So one of like the biggest things with the transition for me on the industry side was like taking ownership of what I didn't know. And in terms of pitfalls, that was probably like the worst point for me in the first several months of my transition was like, I don't know if I felt embarrassed or just felt like I wasn't supposed to like admit to some degree of ignorance, but like I didn't talk about something with my manager that I didn't know. And then we had a meeting and they were not happy. And yeah, so this was the low point for me. And I was like, you know what? Okay, I just need to be proactive. And when I don't know something, I need to say like, hey, I need help. I need someone to like walk through this with me. Like, let's just pin down exactly what I do need to know. And things really turned around for me at my job when I was like, you know what, I'm taking simple ownership of the most basic facts. And that sounds so simple. I think that's also kind of similar to what you see in academia. And I can't tell you how impactful that has been on the other side since like making that switch.
So this is a great point, Kyle, and I have like one particular short, hopefully short. I tend to ramble, which is why I've been quiet this whole time. Anecdote I'm thinking of is a big learning for me in my first industry job after the DRPH, the doctorate, was as a data scientist. I'm a data scientist currently, and at some point, my manager, who's great, gave me some feedback and said, look, the other 3 members on the team, whenever we have a project and I'm like asking for help on something, they're very eager to jump in. I need you to do that more. And that was, to Kyle's point, like the simple but hard thing to do. I didn't realize that, oh, I was staying in my lane, which is what I was taught in the doctoral program. And that's my strength. And so I can speak to that. I can talk to clients using statistical language, but I was asked to do more outside of that, and it was okay. And to you, or at least for me, it felt like, oh, well, I've written about this, like, oh, I'm not trained in that, so why can I do that? I'm going to get shot down. But actually, you won't. And that's what they need. They need that communication, which I wasn't like trained to do at the time. But that was a big step for me to learn and to realize it's these simple things, like just saying, somebody's like, hey, so this database isn't working, and you just jumping in and saying like, yeah, I'll try to help with that, even though it's like I have no idea what the F I'm doing, but that's what they want, that's what they need, that's what they're looking for.
Well, and different levels of expertise, different norms and expectations there, right? So the sort of the PhD level expertise before you speak might be 80, 90, 100. But in a business setting, if you have maybe 5-7% expertise, hey, you're the most knowledgeable in the room. I don't know if other folks have had that experience, but a lot of room to run. And so I'm curious, I want to circle back to a question in the chat, because I think, Eric, you mentioned this not selling your work as well as you could have in the faculty search. How did you sell your PhD to industry?
Yeah, what happened was I actually, so the company I work at now, Evidation, is awesome, and I learned about them during my postdoc. And so I met the chief data scientist and a bunch of other folks at random conferences that we'd attend together, and got to know them that way. So that was part of the soft pitch, I guess. And I really wanted to work for them. This is kind of going back to, I think, someone named Keith earlier who asked, how are you able to do research, or can you do research that you're interested in industry? And my answer in my case is it can be challenging, because you have to find companies and orgs that have a mission that's sort of aligned with what you want to do. But if you find them, and if you really click, good teams, great ethical people, et cetera, then they can help foster your career growth. And my base, so going back one step, the pitch I should have done, the counterfactual, and in my postdoc was, I should have used a buzzword in academia to sell my stuff. Like I should have said, I work on personalized digital health, instead of I work on N of 1 studies. That people are like, most folks don't know what that is. So But see, keywords even go back into academia if you're still going the faculty route. So,
right? Personalized digital health. That sounds pretty exciting. And so, being someone who I also have struggled to find those keywords at points in my career, how do folks find them, right? How do you discover, okay, this is the sticky keyword. This is where my experience is going to create the most leverage to open doors for me?
I would start with reading a lot of job postings, seeing what they're looking for, what kind of keywords they use. And if you know some people who are working on that job, through networking, then you can ask them how those like job descriptions and how, let's say, how those keywords or skills in corporate speak can translate to or what it actually means. Not even translate to academic terms, but what it actually means.
Because job descriptions are only part of the picture. I like it. Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Now, super quick note on that, Irene. In my first career as a biostatistician, coming out of a master's program, I learned within the first probably a few months, there's this line you'll see sometimes: must be able to think independently. That now I know translates to, we don't know what the F this role is going to be like, so you're going to help define that role. But we need you in that role. We need that role. But so let that be known out there. If you see that line, must be able to think independently.
Right. Like, are you cool with the fact that your manager doesn't even know what you're going to be doing? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And you'll hear the phrase managing up at that point.
Yeah. And okay, that's the kind of thing where like you hear things that sound like corporate speak that like couldn't be real, but like honestly, it's really important and like makes a lot of sense when you're in that environment. Managing up is super helpful. That basically means like your manager is limited by the fact that they're way too busy to know everything that you're doing. So you need to give them the key updates that are relevant to them. And then you'll be in their good graces too. So it just like, it helps you and it helps them. At least that's my quick distillation on that.
How many folks on the panel have felt they need to learn how to manage up? Yeah, when you have a boss, it comes in handy. And then I see a question in the chat about saving the chat. I believe folks can actually hit the 3 dots in the chat and hit save. And so if there are insights coming through in the chat that you want to save for later, can folks see the 3 dots? Panelists, you can see those 3 dots, right? And hit the save, or is that just me? Nice. Okay, so folks
I can see the save chat.
Awesome. Oh no, Keith's on his phone, so he cannot do so. Okay, we'll find a way to get you the chat, Keith. Nice. The other thing I wanted to pull out of the chat that I heard, folks were asking about skills from humanities PhDs and where those might click among the skills in industry. Anything that the panel can speak to there? I know that folks have science backgrounds, but anything you've seen that may click with humanities PhD skills?
I guess like, I could offer that everything that I have done on the industry side that isn't like strictly technical, like neuroscience per se or like programming per se, a lot of it is like business in general. And I feel like you'd be really well equipped for that. And like, I just want to be clear, I've been in what I would call like highly technical roles. And I feel like the majority of the job is still in communication between people. Communication via written words in a lot of cases, like by email, communication in meetings, and being able to like parse information, distill it in a meaningful way, and to like really understand what other people are saying and looking for in a conversation. If you have those skills, like you're going to be very, very useful in so many organizations. Like that's just the basic critical stuff that you got to have.
I'd also add, I see a lot of opportunities around project management. So you maybe aren't doing the like coding yourself, but you're helping to support a team of people with high technical skills. So like that being one type of career path in tech. And granted, I'm not in tech, but observing some of my friends who've also left academia, I think that's one real strong point. I also think about like on the nonprofit side, grant writing, grant management, partnership management. I think that involves absorbing a lot of complicated, nuanced information and then, acting on it. And I think PhDs generally are well equipped to do that.
+1. I actually hosted a panel on PhDs in PM, product and program management. So if folks want to go listen into that one, you can hear what goes into those roles. And then Eric, love your answer in the chat saying, here's my recommendation, but it's not my field of expertise. That's that's the industry way to speak to something without expertise. It's stellar. And so there's some questions on this in the chat, and I want to speak to this. Anything you would recommend for folks who are in the sort of messy middle phase of their transition, right? That, like nothing's going to work, nothing is possible, this is a cluster. Anything you would share with folks from your having been there if they're in that moment?
A big point for me was that like I don't think I knew what the different like sectors of jobs were out there. To what you said, Tori, like yeah, I didn't know that like product manager or project manager or technical program manager, I didn't know that any of these were like job titles. My first role out of academia was a senior scientist. I didn't know that was a job title. I only found out about the industry that I'm in right now, like a couple of months ago when a recruiter found me on LinkedIn. So like, I think there's a lot of exploration and walking to do. And I just want to reassure you all, it takes a long time to move between these fields and figure out like where you have a strong match. I don't want you to think that you're doing anything wrong. It is really freaking hard, and we do not have a good like means of sharing this information. So yeah, it takes a lot of time, and there's nothing to do but to explore, in my opinion, and to link up with people and share information as much as possible.
I'd also add that in the process of job application, rejections are kind of normal and shouldn't be seen as something that is like an attack on your skills and you as a person. It's just, if the job doesn't fit, then it doesn't fit. But it doesn't mean that you're a failure or that you don't know enough. It could just be not a good fit. But then you learn what kind of, you learn what kind of jobs might be not a good fit, or what might be what could be a better fit. And sometimes in those job interviews, you can ask those questions like I had one interview where they said, yeah, I don't think this is going to be a good fit because, and then they explained it to me and I was like, oh, okay, that's good to know. Then, then with that knowledge, I maybe improved my other applications.
An interview that provided constructive feedback. That's awesome. Well, and it's funny, the metaphor I like to think of there is almost, those kids' toys where it's like a triangle that you put in the triangle shape and like a circle that you put in the circle shape. If you and a job don't click, okay, you were a circle, they were looking for a square. That doesn't mean you go mold yourself into a square. You just look for the job that's looking for the circle. Right. And so it doesn't mean that you have to mold yourself into some, okay, I'm going to crush myself down so small that I can fit into any opportunity. No, it's more about finding the opportunity that is crafted for what you bring to the table. That's my belief anyway. Panelists, does that sound like nonsense to you, or does it align with what you've seen? Yeah, reasonable.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yes, 100%. I feel like, maybe to like expand on that just a little bit, like I found that when I was looking at data related roles, I might have needed like a couple more skills, which would have been like relatively accessible to upskill towards, and then I would fit even better into like the kind of cookie cutter shape they were looking for. Yeah, I didn't always work really hard at upskilling. I basically just tried my luck until something clicked. Irene's laughing. I feel like we relate.
Yeah, I relate.
With my most recent job search, I faced a lot of rejections for a couple of months. And I was very much on the verge of saying, I'm going to pause my job search and upskill and get a couple more things like SQL and Python, which I feel like would speak more to like, the data world. But then things kind of like clicked at the last second with like statistical programming, where they just wanted R, because for them, that's like new and hot enough, even though I kind of took it for granted.
Nice. And so knowing when to trust yourself, knowing when, okay, a couple extra skills might help, but believing that what you already have will take you a long way. And so panel, anything else on this topic of pitfalls that we haven't covered that you want to make sure to share with folks listening in? We've covered it all. Go ahead, Tyler.
This is super minor, and probably a lot of people already know it, but I've seen it, so I'll say it. Not speaking badly about your current academic situation or academic advisor, even if you are really disillusioned with the academy and are looking to jump as quickly as you can in any materials, or have a polite answer about it if asked.
Yeah, I'll even give folks one from what we've talked about today: more impact. I'd like a job where I can have more impact. Boom, like you can just discount the entire, academic field without sort of bad mouthing it. But yeah, don't recommend going out and saying, here's my thorny experiences. That can be tough. Anything else that folks did that sort of, oh, I put my foot in my mouth there, I wish I hadn't? I would hope that someone wouldn't do that same thing if folks are willing to share.
I have one more. Sorry to talk again. I did a lot of kind of brief phone conversations with people in the industries I was interested in before I was applying for jobs, and sort of speaking to this, not speaking badly about the academy thing. I think I referenced the ivory tower in a conversation, and the person was like, you don't know this, but I'm an adjunct. I've made this career path, but I also still really value the academy. There are a lot of us who are like that. She gave it as constructive feedback, and I was really grateful for it, but I 100% put my foot in my mouth. So.
Yeah, and it is a challenge, right? Speaking to where we want to find fit and what works for us, while also knowing that everyone else has a different path at the same time. It is a tightrope to walk. So.
Yeah, Tyler kind of made me think of something. I feel like, academics are like at their core often self-deprecating. It's like an instinct. But when you move out beyond academia, it's actually uncommon and rare to find people that have PhDs. So if you're really deprecating to yourself as a PhD, you might have the unintended effect of making other people feel bad about themselves, because they're like, I really respect you. That was the thing that surprised me the most. They're like, I really value that you have a PhD. And like the fact that you are so like dismissive of that just kind of like feels bad. So I would say like, I totally understand the instinct. It's so relatable, but like work on offering yourself respect and confidence out of respect for the people around you.
And so it's so interesting. I'm hearing work on mindset and work on communication, where again, probably folks in the chat are thinking, okay, I got to go learn SQL, or I got to go learn like Jira or something like that. But actually, I'm curious, panel, like how many of you feel like you've had mindset change since your time in your PhD, right? Like show of hands if you feel like your mindsets have changed. Right? Mine are changing every week, right? And so like being aware that that's part of the process too, in addition to these tactical skills, right? Mindsets help unlock a whole bunch of other things. All right, so there's still a ton of questions in the chat, but it's 5 minutes till, so I'm going to start to wrap us up just to be respectful of time. We will have a way to follow up for folks, so we'll get to that in a moment. First thing I want to do is thank our panelists for sharing their time and their experiences. Folks want to put like, you know, there we go. You see these little, is that like clapping hands? Is that icon? Yeah, okay, so clapping hands, thumbs up, there it is. Okay, the clapping hands icon. Thank you, panelists, for making time to share your stories and to do so candidly. I think this is really helpful for other folks to be able to see what's possible and that it's not always easy. So I really appreciate that you've taken the time to share your experiences today. Attendees, thank you for making time to learn about paths available to you. It takes courage to look outside of academia, and so thank you for dedicating this hour to actually make space to see what's possible. So this is a good moment to forge future connections. Panelists, if you have any links you want to mention or drop here so that folks can stay in touch with you, that would be great. I want to say I've noticed that Eric has a pillow with his blog title on it. Eric, is that true? Is your blog on that pillow?
I mean, it could be, or it could be a projection. Maybe it's just a background. No,
Whoa.
I've actually walked back there and poked it to show that's real. Yeah. Yeah.
You have a stats of one blog. We've heard about that. Anything else folks want to share as ways for folks to stay in touch or connect?
I posted a job alert on the chat. Our team is looking for a data analyst, senior data analyst. Yep, I posted it on the chat.
And Irene, which buzzwords should folks pay attention to in that job?
Let me see.
Sorry to put you on the spot. You don't have to, but
Actually, I could talk a little bit about it. So one of the things listed here is like set up dashboards and reports. And my previous self would be intimidated by that, or would like maybe think, oh, I don't know how to do that. But those are just other words for creating figures and graphs and visualizations that as PhDs we have done so many times. So yeah, so those are some examples. What else?
Active translation there, right? See what Irene did? It basically taking that dashboard as, you know what, PhDs, you probably created a graph if you're working in some sort of data-oriented field. And so great opportunity to translate. Anything else folks want to share as ways to connect or follow up?
I'm very present on Twitter, but you know, I wanted to put my professional foot forward here. So connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm trying to actually have more of a presence on LinkedIn because I continue to be impressed by the community there. So yes, I look forward to networking with whoever wants to do that.
Awesome. All right, well, then I will close us out and thank everyone for making time today. Hopefully some great future connections and sparks of inspiration have been formed here. I'm so glad we got to take this time to actually fuel that sense of opportunity. And I hope that each of you in attendance, panelist attendees, finds success in growing your career the way that you choose to. So thanks so much for all of you for joining, and I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday. Bye, folks. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.